Mudyanamirandasyagyananjanashalakya Chakshunamilitam yen tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Samyashrishtam manumāpi sacciputram matrasharupam Rupam tasyagrajamurupurim matirim Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhikamadhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratita Gripaya Shri Gurum Tamnatasmi Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Cha Titanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Anarpita Charim Chirat Karunayavatirna Kalam Shamarpaitu Savakti Swalam Haripurata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sindipita Shada Hridaye Kandaresh Purato Vasachinandana Ajanalambita Bhujo Kanakavadato Sankirtanaika Pitaro Kamalaya Takshim Vishwambaro Dvyavaro Jugadharmapal Vande Jagat Priya Guru Karunavataru Ladini Shakti Swarupai Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Vidadara Namastute He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Radhe Vrindavanadishe Karunamrita Vahine Kripaya Nijapadabjadasyanmayam Pradiyatam Bhaktya Vihinaya Paradalakshay Shiptashakamaditarangamadi Kripamai Tvam Sharanam Prapanam Vinde Namaste Charanaravindam Vinde Namaste Charanaravindam Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Ramtara Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Bhramara Gītā ki jai, Gaur Bhakta-vrinda ki jai, Gaur Preman, Hari Bol. So pranam to all of you, good afternoon. Here I'm recording this lecture from Austria. Actually, the day you are seeing this video, I will be already in Finland, but actually I will be arriving there. So I didn't have the chance to connect live for sharing with you this time, and that's why we are sharing this recorded streaming for this time. I hope you may forgive me for that, and hope to meet you next week as well. So today we are continuing with our series of lectures on Sri Bhramara-gita. We are entering into the conclusion section of the whole series. We have been studying last class, the very last verse of Bhramara-gita, the 10th verse. And starting from today, for the next few weeks, we will be making some other series of lectures as an afterthought of this whole Bhramara-gita. What's the conclusion? What comes after? Which are the consequences of this Bumblebee song? So we will start today with the first class of conclusion here. Maybe we will have like 7 or something. So I hope you may have some patience to go along with this narrative. So today we will be studying some verses that come after the last verse of Bhramara-gita. Last verse of Bhramara-gita was verse 21 from the 47th chapter of 10th Canto of the Bhagavatam. And today we will be studying verses 22 till 29. But as usual, first of all, let's make some brief recap of what we studied last week, where we were discussing the last verse, the 10th verse of the Bhramara-gita, where Sri Radha addresses finally Uddhava after speaking like a mad woman to the bumblebee for 9 verses. In the very last verse, according to Jiva Goswami, she addresses Uddhava. the official messenger here in the story, thinking, till now I have not asked what I should have asked. And therefore, in her very last statement, some request comes. So she says to Uddhava, Uddhava, it is indeed regrettable that Krishna resides in Mathura. Does he remember his father's household affairs and his friends, the cowherd boys? O great soul, does he ever talk about us, his maidservants? When will he lay on our heads his aguru-scented hand? So this is the very last verse of Sri Bhramara-gita. In each one of these fourth lines, Sri Radha expresses different sanctuary bhavs, as we will see. Gravity, humility, and steadiness, eagerness. So to begin with, she expresses her gravity by asking about where is Krishna? Krishna is in Mathura yet? Because the idea is we have heard, some news came to Braj that he went to Avanti for Gurukul with Sandipani Muni. So is he still in the Gurukul? Has he returned to Mathura? Will he go somewhere else? Maybe he's going even further from Braj than Mathura, or maybe he's returning to Braj. Of course, that's the real intention and idea of this question ultimately. in his commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reasons why Krishna does not return, as we have shared. He wants to, but he cannot because of circumstantial impositions in the lila, if you will, with many simultaneous purposes at the same time. Not only extolling the glories of the Brajavasis, highlighting the glories of their love in separation by contrasting them with the love of the Mathuravasis, and so on. So in the second line, then Sri Radha asks about more specifically different camps, if you will, Vatsalya camp, Sakya camp, Madhurya camp, in that particular order, which corresponds with the ages of Krishna, Kumar, Poganda, and Kishore. So first he asks about if Krishna is remembering, whatever he may be, Mathura in this case, his father's household affairs, his house where he was born, all the remembrances from that time. And then does he remember the elders? There's also other elders like Upananda, his uncles and aunts and so on. Then going to the Sakya camp, does he remember his friends? He has such nice friends, and all of them, both Vatsalya and Sakya, are in the condition of total devastation in separation from Krishna and Braj. And finally, in the third line, Sri Radha asked regarding about the Madhurya camp, that he sometimes even speak about to us. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that very nicely in his purport also. Like Radha thinking, Krishna, when he's in Mathura, he's not fully satisfied with the ladies there. And when the ladies ask how they could satisfy him, he should tell them about the ladies of Vrindavan, how the gopis are expert in perfuming themselves and dressing themselves and pleasing him in so many ways, in playing so many different games. And he will tell them, actually, I'm not so attached to you as I am to them, so I will return to Vrindavan tomorrow morning. In this way, Sri Radha projects her bhav. And as we will see eventually, that will come to happen. Krishna will return to Braj. Of course, in the context of this verse, also Srila Jiva Goswami in particular emphasizes again the concept of Swakiya Tattva, not Bhava, but how Radha and Krishna belong to one another. Krishna and the gopis belong to one another, Shaktiman and Shakti, especially with the term Aryaputra present in this verse. Krishna, the son of a respectable man, Nanda Maharaj, which Bharat Muni says this is a term exclusively used in the realm of aesthetics between wife and husband, from wife to address her husband. And finally, in the last line of the verse, after inquiring about the different camps in Braj, Vatsalya, Sakya, Madhurya, she asks, rather presents her last request, when will Krishna lay on our heads his Guru-scented hand? In other words, when he will return, when he will bless us. Hand on the head means blessing. And for that to happen, Krishna has to return. But actually, when she says this, she herself in her ecstasy and union in separation experiences Krishna's hand on her head and faints immediately by perceiving this physical contact with Krishna. So this is the end of the Bhramara Gītā with Sri Radha collapsing after mentioning the word hand and feeling that hand on her head, with Krishna confirming, I'm here. I cannot be but united with you at every single moment in one form or another. So again, this verse represents 4 qualities present in each one of the successive lines: gravity, humility, agitation, and longing. First, second, third, and fourth line, which make up for the type of Chitra Jalpa called Sujalpa, which Rupa Goswami describes in this way. Without of honest sincerity, a lover inquires about Sri Hari with gravity, humility, and unsteadiness, and intense longing or eagerness. That's called Sujalpa. Also, an interesting point that we mentioned at the end of our lecture last week was that some authorities, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, mentioned that the bumblebee was actually Krishna himself, appearing in this unique form in order to drink the sweetness of Sri Radha's Chitra Jalpa, or divine talks. So that's another way of conceiving the Bhramara Gītā as a dialogue, basically conversation between Radha and Krishna, each one in a totally unique form and intoxicated state. This height of love and separation. And we concluded our previous lecture also with some parallels between Krishna in Mathura, who is now there, in comparison to Ram when Sita is banished from the kingdom, and how during the day he's showing nice face to the public, but in the night he's locking himself in his chambers and crying and crying and crying. And also we explain another reason why Krishna is not returning to Braj is because the Mathura Vasis will die in separation from Krishna, while the Brajavasis somehow survive, which may seem that, oh, Mathura Vasis love Krishna more than the Brajavasis, and that's why they will die. But actually it's not like that. The Brajavasis are not dying only because they think if Krishna returns and we die, he will suffer because of that. So somehow, even though it's so difficult for us to bear this forest fire of separation, we have to survive. So all this said, this is the precise moment where Uddhava thinks, now it's the moment for me to deliver the message. Now is the moment for me to give to the gopis the letter that Krishna sent for them. Because the gopis are expressing themselves in terms of we are separated from Krishna. They feel themselves in that under the particular bhava they are in. And Krishna in his message will confirm this is not the fact. We cannot be but united. So today we will start with this section where finally Uddhava will speak, say something. Till now he was totally speechless and fiberglassed, but he will take the word now and start to say something and then deliver Krishna's messages. And then the gopis will have something to say in that regard. And then Uddhava will pronounce some famous prayers in relation to what the gopis have said and the glories of their love. And then we will conclude our whole series of Bhramara Gītā, and again, some 7 classes narrating how Uddhava remains in Braj for some time and how the whole Antya-lila turns from manifest lila to in manifest, from prakat to aprakat. So let's start with again, we will see today verses 22 to 29 from chapter 47 of 10th Canto, just continuing with the next verse after the last verse we have been seeing, the last verse of Bhramara Gītā. But before that, a brief in-between background description of what's going on after Sri Radha pronounces this last verse of the Bhramara Gītā. Srila Jiva Goswami, in his Gopal Shampoo, mentions that Sri Radha remained unconscious for 1 muhurta. 1 muhurta means 48 minutes, almost an hour. After mentioning this last verse of Bhramara Gītā, they're saying, when he will put my hand on my head, collapse. So all the Sakis are caring for her, trying to revive her, crying for her, lamenting for her. Srila Jiva Goswami says, oh Radha, friend Radha with such love for Krishna, oh Radha, who always gives us happiness. We see you are in a deathly state with dark eyes. So, and at the same time, Jiva Goswami describes how Uddhava himself, who somehow is a facsimile of Krishna, appeared like his spurti because of physical similarity and so on. He started to lament and trying to do something to bring Radha back to consciousness, by bringing close to her a fresh piece of Krishna's cloth, which holds Krishna's bodily fragrance. Krishna gave this to Uddhava, knowing all the things that will unfold and happen, even though Uddhava say, why you are giving me this piece of your cloth? What's the practical purpose of that? And Krishna say, basically, You will know in time. So now is the moment for him to use this in trying to revive Sri Radha. So to say that Sri Radha was situated in the center of the assembly, Uddhav himself was helping in that with great determination, and Uddhav, as we will see, will try to convince her and the gopis, you will meet Krishna. So the Sakis were sitting all around, Sri Radha in the center, and Uddhav trying to console them for a long time in order to relieve them of emotions. Jiva Goswami says, difficult for anyone to bear. There are many of these descriptions in Shastra. What's the type of joy and sorrow that Sri Radha feels due to the unlimited degree of her love. Impossible to bear such a heavy load of both happiness and distress, ecstatic one. Very intense, very intense. That's why she chose to embrace Krishna when he wanted to taste that himself as Mahaprabhu. This is too much, she says. I will accompany you somehow because you will roll on the ground, you will smash your head on the wall. This is uncontainable, basically. Impossible to contain. So this is the stage in which from here on, Uddhav will start to say something and so on. But before Uddhav starts to speak, Sukadev Goswami will pronounce one verse. Remember, all this is being narrated by Sukadev to Parikshit Maharaj. So Sukadev Goswami in verse 22, I will read these verses since we will see many verses in each class from now on. I will read them straight in English, at least most of them. So verse 22 says, Sukadev Goswami said to Parikshit, having heard this Bhramara-gita, Uddhav then tried to pacify the gopis, who were most eager to see Krishna. He thus began relating to them the message of their beloved. So this is only one verse. Next verse, Uddhav starts to speak, but Sukadev Goswami puts in context how Uddhav reacted to the Bhramara-gita, which was the condition of the gopis. Krishna darshan lalasa, very eager to see Krishna. And what did he do in order to relieve them, to serve them in the spirit of honoring what he was witnessing coming from them? So he tried to deliver the message. Srila Jiva Goswami comments on this verse, mentioning that Uddhav spoke to inform the gopis of Krishna's powers and the greatness of his prem in order to stop the transformations arising from their prem and to praise them in order to relieve their feelings of wretchedness. Out of respect, Uddhav did not speak to Radha directly. She heard through others. So we will see Uddhav will try to present the discourse with lots of ingredients of Aishwarya and Krishna being God, trying to somehow dilute the intense emotionality that the gopis are experiencing in relation to Krishna as their lover. But we'll see all this knowledge will drown in an ocean of Madhurya. And he's not speaking to Radha directly. And there is this consideration. If you have someone who is very, very much honorable and respectful for you, you won't address the person directly. So that's what Uddhav is trying to show here, how much respect he has for Radha after he has witnessed it, this degree of her prem in the Bhramara-gita. Sanatana Goswami, his own commentary to this verse, says something similar. He mentions that since it wasn't suitable to begin to message immediately right after the very just immediate end of the Bhramara-gita, because the gopis, Sri Radha in particular, were so disturbed by the currents of prem, then Uddhav waited for a minute and began to speak a while later. And when the disturbance of prem somehow lessened, he thought, okay, now it's the moment for them to hear the message. And as we will see, he will start with statements expressing the good fortune of the gopis, trying with that to counteract the gopis' misery and trying to give up their disturbance, basically. So that's the intention of Uddhav. Again, he didn't speak immediately, began immediately, but when he did so, was with the intention of relieving them and glorifying their prem. He was really meaning that. So in this way, Uddhav began to speak as follows. So let's go to the next verse. Verse 23, Sri Uddhav said, certainly you gopis are all successful and are universally worshipped because you have dedicated your minds in this way to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva. So here we'll start to see this infiltration of Aishvarya. With Uddhava is glorifying the gopis and you are all successful, he will repeat that at the end of his staying in Braj. Metaparam tanubritu vigopavadu govindaiva nikilatmani rudhava. You have such a love for he who is the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan, Vasudev. So for the gopis again, Krishna is not Bhagavan. Uddhava is trying to mix these two realities. No? In one sense, you have such a love for Krishna and he is God. So you have such a love in this unique way for God. So with this, he's trying to dilute the intense emotionality of their prem because Uddhava thinks they may die if they continue escalating in this direction. So by saying here that Krishna is supreme, again, also at the same time, another purpose is that for us, for the rest of the world, Uddhava, the greatest sage and most sober personality, minister of Krishna and so on, if he says that the love of the gopis is the greatest, it means it is the greatest. And that's a point that Krishna wanted to make through Uddhava by sending him to Braj. So by here, Uddhava saying Krishna is supreme, therefore Uddhava shows the gopis have attained the highest success because he's the supreme and you have the topmost love for the supreme. Therefore, your love is supreme. Ultimately, that's the idea here. Jiva Goswami says something different. You, Radha, and all the gopis having complete prem from Krishna are worshipped by others. The type of worship you perform is worshipable. The type of love you have is the goal to attain, the ultimate goal to attain. Then I will skip some, I think only one verse, but a few ones. In verse 25, Sri Uddhava continues with his praise of the gopis' position. He says, by your great fortune, you have established an excelled standard of pure devotion for the Lord, Uttama Shloka, a standard even the sages can hardly attain. Muktanama Pishidanam, Narayana Parayana, and so on. Many verses like this. So Uddhava implies here, your bhakti, according to our Purvacharyas, consists of Mahabhav, and this bhakti is Nitya Siddha. In other words, you are Ragatmikas. You are made of love. You don't have love for Krishna. You are love for Krishna. That's a different thing. You are not receiving love, acquiring love, developing love, but you are love for Krishna. You are the very form and personification of bhakti, Mahabhav, the highest degree. That's Nitya Siddha, eternally perfect, eternally established Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem. Sadhya Kabunai. So here Uddhava implies there not only the great your great fortune, but my great fortune, basically. He's saying by myself being witnessing the degree of your great fortune. By showing this, basically Uddhava saying here, you establish an excelled standard of pure devotion. In other words, you, by your own example, you are preaching to the whole world. By your achar, you are doing prachar. Just by people hearing about the degree, the intensity of your surrender and love for Krishna, your conduct in itself is the most powerful type of discourse, because your conduct is made of incomparable bhakti that we call prem. So follow, you are the very forms of ragatmika bhakti. Therefore, following in your footsteps, Raganuga Bhakti will be spread as a practice in the future. That's what Mahaprabhu comes to give. Prema rasani rasa korite ashvadan, Raga Marga Bhakti Loki korite prachana. He came to preach Raga Bhakti to the world. That Raga Bhakti has to do with following in the footsteps of the Ragadmikas. So here the gopis are those Ragadmikas, some of those, of course, not only the only ones, but in this particular case. So with all this also, Uddhava is kind of giving some prediction for the future. The power of your example is so intense, so deep, that it's not only affecting me, but in the future will create waves and waves on thousands of practitioners trying to adopt that sacred, passionate path of love. Then in verse 26, he says, continues speaking to the gopis, by your great fortune, you have left your sons, husbands, bodily comforts, relatives, and homes in favor of the supreme male, who is known as Krishna. Again, he tries to put in context, who is Krishna? The supreme male, Purushottam. Another words of saying, it's another form of saying, Shaktiman, Bhagavan. And you have left everything behind for his sake. For his sake. So the implication here is, having seen and heard about your actions, other people will do the same. Knowing about the degree of your attachment for Krishna and detachment for everything else, other people will feel inspired to tread that same path. So here Uddha mentions a list of elements of potential attachments, if you will, and the order of the list is from more important to less important: sons, husbands, bodily comfort, relatives, homes, according to the Charya. All of these points will be re-mentioned eventually by Uddha before leaving Braj in his famous prayers, Sammaho Charanari Nujusam Mahanusham, and so on. So this is the nature of Parakiya. Let me share some words in this connection, since this has a lot to do with what Parakiya is about: leaving aside sons, family, social considerations, reputation, dharma, for the sake of paradharma. So Parakiya, the love of a lover, has a lot to do with that. It is said that in order to increase the eagerness of the divine couple, let's speak about Sri Radha as the very ultimate epitome of Parakiya in relation to Krishna. Yogamaya makes some arrangement for the love of Radha Krishna to be accompanied, basically ornamented by three elements which are really characteristic of Parakiya Bhav. First one is Bahubharyamam. So Bahubharyamam, this is mentioned by Rupa Goswami in Ujjval Nilamani. Bahubharyamam means this love is full of obstacles. We already described this in previous series. On a daily basis, for them to meet under the sun in the mid of the day, I mean, they have to cross so many obstacles. And in the night, what to speak the night? The family, the forest, society, so on. I won't go into detail again now in that direction. Second characteristic is Prachanna Kamata. Prachanna Kamata is a hidden love. It's a love that cannot be expressed openly, explicitly, everywhere and anywhere. So it has to be concealed in a very artful and expert way. And that's what Parakiya is all about. And all that makes that love more and more thick and condensed in one's inner quarters. And third characteristic is Sudurlabha, very rare, very precious. So all of these put together, combined, become causes for the highest type of loving ecstasy. Srila Jiva Goswami says something similar in his Priti Sandarbha, Anucheda 279. He mentioned that some people may think that all these different obstacles that so much characterize Parakiya Bhav actually increase the gopis' love for Krishna, but actually that is not so. Actually, the love of the gopi for Krishna, of course, vice versa, but in this case, the love for the gopi for Krishna is naturally the highest. It doesn't need obstacles to increase. As we will see, the obstacles only highlight their presence, its presence. And this is confirmed, Jiva Goswami said, by the queens of Dwarka in the Bhagavatam 10:83-43. They say, Braja Striyo Jat Bhajanti. They say, we desire the same contact with the feet of the Supreme Lord, the same contact that the young woman of Braja had. And Uddhav, similarly, as we will see in his last prayers, he says in Bhagavatam also 10:47-58, Panchanti yat bhavaviyo. Me, devotees, sages, desire the intensity of the gopis bhav. But the queens of Dwarka and Uddhav, these two cases quoted here, Jiva Goswami continues, they could not attain the level of the gopis because their love for him was legal. The love of the queens and Uddhav. They were friends, they were husband and wife, legal love, if you will, on social terms. Therefore, it was unobstructed. They were not the obstacles that are there in Parakiya. So he concludes saying, so what's the role of the obstacles here? It is said that when a mad elephant storms into a fortress, only then it shows his strength. But that fortress is not causing that strength. In the same way, it's just showing that which is already there. In the same way, the obstructions caused by the gopi superiors, basically, the obstacles, is not causing the love of the gopis, but showing the supremacy of their love. Their love is already there in them. They are ragadmikas. They need to see this. So, as we many times say, the obstacles should not discourage us. We should draw some inspiration from this, and whatever obstacles come into our path should nourish our passionate desire towards surrender. Similarly, in Vidagdha Madhava 5.7, there is a nice section where Madhu Mangal is asking about the characteristics of unconditional love. And he asks to Purnamasi. And Purnamasi says, he asks, which are the attributes of unconditional love, Ananya Bhakti? And she says, when one hears praise from his beloved, he outwardly remains neutral, but feels pain within his heart. When he hears his beloved making accusations about him, he takes them to be jokes and enjoys pleasure. When he finds faults in his beloved, they do not diminish his love, nor do the beloved's good qualities increase his spontaneous affection. Thus, spontaneous love continues under all circumstances. And when Madhu Mangal heard this reply by Purnamasi, he said, oh, this is the nature of love between Radha and Madhava. That's how it works for them. It's not that, again, faults in the other person diminish the love, good qualities augment the love. The love is already there, from time without beginning. Of course, it's increasing and augmenting, but not because of this or because of that, because of the very nature of that love. That's what we call unconditional love. There are no conditions for that love to be this or that, but it's spontaneously growing. Nityasiddha. So then, after Uddhav said this, glorified the gopis again, you have left all many things for the sake of Krishna. And the gopis reply, not explicitly in the verses of the Bhagavatam, but in between the lines, the gopis replied to Uddhav, according to our commentators, in which sense it is fortunate for you that we have given up wealth and family to accept Krishna, the supreme male. So Uddhav replies in the next verse, verse 27. He says to the gopis, you have rightfully claimed the privilege of unalloyed love for the transcendental Lord, O most glorious gopis. Indeed, by exhibiting your love for Krishna in separation from him, you have shown me great mercy. And now he more officially states his own good fortune by witnessing their good fortune, the good fortune of their prem. And here we'll spend some time with this verse a little bit. It's very interesting. There's one expression here called Sarvatma Bhava, this original Sanskrit, which Jiva Goswami translates Uddhav saying this to the gopis, you have all bhavas up to Mahabhav, Sarva Atma Bhav. No? So all these developments of Prem, Sneha, Man, Pranaya, Raga, Nurag, Bhav, Mahabhav, and all the sub-developments of Mahabhav. So that bhava that you have for the Lord, Sarva Atma, Atma can mean also Krishna. Atma means body, mind, soul, so many things. And also can mean Krishna. He's the Atma of the Atma. So you have Sarvatma Bhava. You have all types of bhavas for Krishna, up to the highest one, Mahabhav. So this bhava that you have for him makes him be in control by you. Therefore, he's not far from you. Now Uddhav is trying to, with this type of words, to give relief and hope to the gopis. And he's coming. Mahabhaga, he calls him. Mahabhaga means, oh, great fortunate ones. Separation, as you perceive it, is only external, as we'll see today at the end also in the next class. So you should not absorb your mind in that exclusively as thinking we are separated. I think that this separation, Uddhav basically concludes according to Sri Jiva here, I think that separation has appeared externally only in order to give mercy to me by showing the greatness of your prem. So I think that Yogamaya made this arrangement. Of course, Uddhav may not speak in those terms. We are saying that in order for Uddhav to witness this particular scenario of Raj in Vipralamba, in separation, the greatness, to extol and to highlight the glories of the prem. So in other words, the gift that Uddhav feels he received was to realize, oh my God, Krishna never leaves Vrindavan, as we know, ultimately. This is the insight he's starting to receive more and more at this point. And remember in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we read when Mahaprabhu was instructing Rupa Goswami, he said, he instructed Shri Rupa, never take Krishna out of Vrindavan. In other words, whatever the appearances, Krishna never abandons his devotees. Krishna never abandons his abode. And of course, this instruction was given while Sri Rupa was writing his Lalita Madhava, his play, which describes in detail the departure of Krishna from Braj, as we know. So to accommodate Mahaprabhu's instruction, Rupa Goswami made numerous changes in his play. And basically he concluded saying that Yogamaya made an announcement mentioning all these events where Krishna seems to leave Braj are somehow a bad dream or hallucination that Yogamaya herself created for the sake of pastimes, of nourishing the whole dynamics of the Lila. In fact, the conclusion is neither Krishna nor the gopis had ever left Gokul, as we mentioned once over and over again. He never puts a step out of Braj. So Uddhava tries to make this point here, again, with the word sarvatma bhava, glorifying the gopis. You have such bhava for Atma, for Krishna. I mean, he cannot leave this place for a moment. This bhava or mahabhava is the seventh, again, manifestation of prem in all these developments, from sneha to mahabhava. And this manifests only in you, not even in Lakshmi, interestingly. It is, he says, it is like a spirit, like some type of privilege, special privilege, which had been by the Lord to you, woman, alone, and not to anyone else. Adhikritya is the term in Sanskrit originally here. You have received this particular privilege of having this love for him. Your love is uniquely competent. That's called by Rupa Goswami Samartha Rati, in comparison to other forms of romantic love. Samanjasa Rati, Sadharani Rati. Samartha Rati means it's so condensed, so selfless, so dedicated, that it's competent to control Ishvara himself, the controller himself. And by your manifestation of love and separation in particular, Uddhava mentions it with full humility and crying, really moved in his heart, you have been really merciful to me, because I have been witnessing all these varieties, all this parade of bhava, different forms of bhava and ecstasy, mahabhav, chitra, jalpa, divya, and mad. I mean, all this is Uddhava's reply to the Bhramara-gita. Please bear that in mind. This is the main darshan he has had with the gopis till now. So if you have not experienced separation from Krishna, especially Sri Radha in Bhramara-gita, Uddhava concludes, Krishna would have not sent me here, and I would not have observed this great wonder. So now Uddhava starts to have more and more aha moments. Like, oh, now I'm tying all the knots and realizing why Krishna sent me here. It's becoming more and more apparent, So he's describing in a very clear way his good fortune. So to this, the gopis may reply, according to our commentators in between the lines. Oh, Uddhava, we are speaking about Mahabhav, but in speaking about that, what's the use of praising us and yourself? You came here to pacify us, right? So that means you have some message from Krishna which can remove our sorrow, because that's the only way we will be pacified. So if you have that message, please tell that to us, share that with us immediately. So the gopis don't have too much mind for philosophical dialogue and so on. They appreciate Uddhava, but they want to really know why you came from, why you came here. So Uddhava then replies in the next verse. When he tries to console the gopis, and he sees, they're in a better condition now. So I can start to deliver Krishna's message here. He will introduce the message in the next verse, and then start officially with the message. So according to some commentators, Uddhava says, okay, now they're in a more balanced way, so I can share the message. Or Jiva Goswami gives another point, but makes the same idea, as Uddhava is upset on not seeing any decrease in the gopis' agitation. And he thinks, therefore, okay, the only way they may recover then is by hearing Krishna's message. So I will simply begin to speak. So whether they got more balance or not, because of whatever those reasons, Uddhava considers this is a moment to present Krishna's messages. So text 28, where Uddhava will introduce the message. He says, my good ladies, now please hear your beloved's message, which I, the confidential servant of my master, have come here to bring you. So he's introducing for a moment, creating the moment, the proper moment. So here, interestingly, Uddhava described himself as Rahas Karaha, which means someone who, the executor of confidential duties, basically. Kara, rasa, rahas, comes from rahasya, or secret, and karaha refers to someone who is doing secrets, basically, or executor of confidential duties. So what's the implication here? Of course, he's the messenger of Krishna. So by this, Uddhava is hinting to the gopis, you should seek out some hidden import in Krishna's message. I will repeat Krishna's message, but the message is beyond my own head, actually. I know I'm delivering something confidential, but it's so confidential that me, myself, the messenger, I'm not aware of the full implications of this message. So I see because of your prem, you will have the capacity of seeing in between the lines, of hearing implied meanings of this message. So that's why Uddhava himself presents as deliverer of confidential messages, Rahas Karaha. So it is said that when Krishna wrote his message, he was so affected emotionally, internally to the gopis, he wrote it with his own hand, that his letter, his handwriting was difficult to understand. It was too ecstatic, too trembling. And therefore Uddhava considered, better I myself, I will read the letter to the gopis. I won't give the letter to the gopis. Why? Mainly, not only because they may not understand the letter. I mean, for sure they will have more capacity to understand the letter than Uddhava, but he thought, oh, if they took the letter, they would cry so profusely that they will, drown the whole letter into a pool of tears. And at that moment, that will be impossible to read it. Not like the famous Srimad-Bhagavatam of Gadadhar Pandit. All the ink was totally erased by his constant tears while reading the Bhagavatam. Empty, blank pages, but full of the very essence of the Bhagavatam. So it is because of this that Uddhava himself read the message, which is said that was written by Sri Krishna in a very grave style, mood, in such a way that all the different philosophers and sober personalities around the world could appreciate the pure love of God in every aspect. In other words, he's trying to serve and glorify Radha and the gopis by speaking this message and showing the degree of their love for him. So this message, before going to the first verse, that will be the last verse we will see today, the first verse of Krishna's message. This message consists of what sometimes is known as Adhyatma Siksha. Adhyatma Siksha, which is instruction about the nature of spirit, Brahman, and the soul in more philosophical Upanishadic terms, abstract presentation. Krishna himself delivers a similar message when in his meeting with the gopis at Kurukshetra in the solar eclipse. You can read them. It's verses 40 to 47 of the 10th Canto, chapter 82. We spoke a little bit about that recently in Bulgaria for the getting closer to the Rath Yatra celebration. So in both of these sections, in the Kurukshetra narration and here, Krishna will emphasize, as we will see, the impossibility of anyone's being separated from him. And what's the reason for that? Of course, he is Paramatma, the indwelling super soul, and he's also Brahman, the all-pervading Brahman. But as we will see, the gopis have no ear for that philosophical sphere, and they are catching a deeper, further level of content there, which nobody else was able to catch. So again, all these verses overtly are presented in very grave, philosophical, terse language. And of course, Gaudiya Vaishnavas are not in denial of the truth of those statements on that level. But since for the Gaudiya, their personal Ishtadev, their personal expression of the Supreme is Krishna in Braj, and that Krishna in Braj supersedes all the other features of the divine, namely Paramatma and Bhagavan, and Brahman, and even other forms of Bhagavan. The point is, for Gaudiya, such an explanation on the level of Adhyatma Siksha does not convey too much rasa, does not give satisfaction, and therefore the Gaudiyas will take the gopis' reply to Krishna's message to be proof of this. No? They will find another meaning deeper than that. And remember, we are here in the Bhagavad, and the very beginning of the Bhagavad, in the Chaturshloki, which is the very first original section of the Bhagavad, and the fourth seed verses, it is said, Anvayabhyatirekabhyam. This is to be understood both directly and indirectly. So we have to maintain this always in context. There is always, each section of the Bhagavatam possesses a direct meaning, but also an indirect one. So here we will go through that as well. There is an explicit, obvious meaning, but there will be another layers of possibilities, which is where the gopis inhabit. And we'll see also, not only there is Aishvarya, but sometimes Krishna will describe himself not only as Paramatma, but as Brahman. Sometimes his words may border monism, or what some may call it Beta Vedanta, in one particular context. So this language of Aishvarya, if not monism, which pervades these instructions to the gopis, is actually seen by Gaudiya commentators such as Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, as an abomination to the bhakti, to the personalism present in true ultimate bhakti. So that level of final conclusion it cannot be the all in all that Krishna has to say to the gopis. So such teachings belong more to the realm of Gyan, so are not to be even considered beneficial for the ordinary devotee. How much less appealing they will be for Krishna's most exalted devotee, the Braja Gopikas. So as we will see, it does them no good to hear that Krishna is present in the spiritual world when they feel his physical absence so intensely here. There are the topmost sages and yogis, but at the same time, this presented themselves as uncivilized village girls. So according to the Nara-lila and the Bhav that predominates the earthly lila, they will express the gopis themselves accordingly. And therefore, they will find another meaning to all these words, as we will see. So after this introduction, we will share today the very first verse of Krishna's message to the gopis, which may be one of the most well-known ones, which is verse 29 of this 47th chapter of 10th Canto. Totally, there are 9 verses. So today we will see one, and we will close our session today here. And in the next meeting, we will see the 8 remaining verses, if we have time. So let's go to the first one. It says like this. The Supreme Lord said, speaking to the gopis, "You are never actually separated from me, for I am the soul of all creation, just as the elements of nature, ether, air, fire, water, and earth, are present in every created thing. So I am present within everyone's mind, life, air, and senses, and also within the physical elements and the modes of material nature." So this is the first message that Krishna sends to the gopis through Uddhava. So let's try to unpack the meaning of this verse. You can see very overtly, very clearly, Krishna speaking in very abstract Aishvaric terms. I'm not separated from you, which is the very first point Krishna wants to make. Do not think we are separated. But then he starts to share some analogies, as we'll see, with the elements of nature and so on. So let's see what our Purvacharyas had to say in this connection, beginning with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in this case. So he says that Krishna's first message, this verse, gives again instructions in philosophical language, will act, one, he says, to reveal the unassailable, invulnerable, basically, strength of the Gopis' prem to the most intelligent scholars, as we mentioned, beginning with Uddhava. And second, this message has to do with hiding the greatness of the Gopis' love from the dull-minded. So extolling, highlighting something to those who have the capacity of appreciating that, and hiding and protecting that from those who do not have that capacity. And then Vishwanath says, this verse, therefore, and the rest of this series, 9 verses, serves a dual purpose like the Mohini incarnation, who behave differently in relation to the devotees and the demons. Remember the Mohini avatar of Sri Krishna appearing like a beautiful lady and chanting when the Asuras and Suras and Devas were like churning the ocean for obtaining Amrit. And Mohini cheated the Asuras, took the nectar from them and gave that to the Devas. So similarly, this section will highlight and benefit those who have the capacity and somehow cheat those who do not have the eye to appreciate that. So in this connection, Krishna thinks basically, although through Uddhava I'm giving the gopis the nectar of knowledge, as we will see, he's trying, Gyan, but this knowledge, this Gyan cannot extinguish the fire, the forest fire of their love and separation. Rather, that knowledge becomes totally swallowed, consumed by the heat of that fire. And so Krishna himself is witnessing, wow, just see the power of their love. It can swallow this Gyan with the charm, it captures so many people and makes them leave the whole world in its pursuit. For the gopis, it's just being swallowed immediately. The gopis prem, therefore, is the strongest thing on earth and beyond it, because it has rendered useless this Gyan yoga that me, myself, Krishna is teaching in so many forms. I am the master of the mind, I'm the master of yoga, I'm Hrishikesh, I'm Yogeshwara, Yogeshwareshwara. I'm famous by delivering these Upanishad discourses, but for the gopis, all this is just swallowed. Like if you throw a blade of grass into a pot of boiling milk, it will be swallowed and disappear totally. So this verse begins with the words, the Supreme Lord said. So of course, these are the words of Uddhava. Krishna himself is not presenting himself in third person to the gopis as such. The Supreme Lord said, but Uddhava himself is trying to insert, again, these Aishvarya elements, trying to dilute the emotional intensity of the gopis. So these are Uddhava's words. The Supreme Lord said. What's the reason again? Uddhava is thinking different reasons, but one of them could be, I have love for Krishna, Uddhava thought, but I find difficult to understand the meaning of his words. He's reading this and he's not fully, he knows there's something else here. Therefore, he is Bhagavan, he's the Lord. He has this awareness, Uddhava. So I will reveal the Lord's message to the gopis as if he were directly speaking it to them, keeping the ambiguity that I perceive of his message intact. I won't try to give any interpretation. I will just share whatever it say there, and that's a good take, no? Because if Uddhava is trying to explain something he himself does not understand, that will really greatly disturb the gopis. So the gopis are able to hear the message as it is and draw the ultimate meaning according to their bhav, and through that sprinkle Uddhava with their own insight and realization. So basically, what's implied in this verse, when Krishna speaks with some analogy with the elements of nature being in everything and being separated at the same time, and similarly himself never separated from the gopis. So Krishna here implies, oh gopis, you are never separated from me. So why you are crying so much over and over again, even with a wish to die? And of course, the gopis may reply to this, according to Vishwanath. In which sense you say you are not separate from us? I mean, you are not here. So Krishna's first message is replying here like this: I'm never separated from you because I am the super soul. I am Paramatma Antaryami, pervading everything. All the revealed Shastra, all the great sages, all the Devas, Varuna, and so on, great personalities say this. Therefore, I'm always present, not only in every heart, but in every atom in your bodies, which means you are not separated from me. So again, Krishna is in this level of instruction speaking in really philosophical terms. So of course, the gopis have no eye, no ear for that. So at this point, the gopis may reply between the lines, oh Praneshwar. They won't call him oh Paramatma. No, oh Praneshwar, oh Lord of our Pran. Why did you send Uddhava to instruct us in philosophy when we were dying in separation from you? And now, again, philosophy, this is the idea. Krishna is on one level speaking philosophy, and they are asking, but we are dying. Why in separation from you? Why philosophy? No, they have no head for that. So anticipating that possible question is that Krishna answered, oh, unintelligent girls, I only had Uddhava instruct you in the methods of pure love, not Gyan. How did you conclude that I was teaching you about Gyan? In other words, overtly it may seem Uddhav and Krishna through Uddhav is speaking about Gyan to the gopis. But actually there is no Gyan. Or if you want, there is the supreme type of Gyan. Gyan Parama Guhyam Me, as the Bhagavatam says. The topmost divine secret, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam. So there is when Krishna proceeds to give another explanation to the present verse. In the vision, in the trance of the gopis, they feel all these revelations coming after hearing the verses. So the verse ultimately is not speaking about Gyan, speaking about Prem. So what is Krishna saying here to the gopis? Your separation from me is not separation in a complete sense, but it is only in terms of the body. Since the word Atma can refer to body, as we say, mind, intelligence, and soul, even Krishna, and pure love is a function of the Atma. Therefore, Krishna implies my Atma, my soul, intelligence, mind, and senses, is still residing among you all. It was merely my body that was taken to Mathura. I took my body to Mathura, only my body. Similarly, your senses, intelligence, and mind, your Atma, this compound indicated by the word Atma, reside with me in Mathura. Only your bodies remain in Braj. In other words, both of us will be residing whenever love for each other is their presence. It has nothing to do with the geographical location of the body. So Krishna continues then. All scriptures proclaim, I'm subservient to pure love. Sadhavo hridayam maham sadunam hridayam tvaham, and so on. So many verses. And Krishna himself said that. No ham bhakta paradino hiyaschatantri. I'm not independent in the matter of love. Therefore, separation between you and me, we have a bond of prem. That's it. The greatest chain, if you will. It's impossible to break. So the separation exists only in the separation of our bodies, and this gives rise to some feelings of suffering and separation, which is another phase of love, another turning of the whole pot, if you will. So now, using this vehicle of separation, Prem desires to increase itself to the utmost. So that's a nice way of conceiving separation. It's a vehicle of Prem through which Prem itself desires to increase to the utmost. So that's, as many times we have shared, a good part to play, a good role to play for separation, to make Prem increase. Basically, everything there is dedicated for Prema to increase, for Rasa to increase, for Lila to expand. It's just everyone is totally absorbed in that direction, orchestrated by Purnamasi Yogamaya. So, the implication here, Krishna is saying, according to Vishwanath, even though I have great longing to return to Braj and be there with you, even in physical terms, of course, it's a transcendental physicality in the case of Krishna and the gopis, but how can I immediately bring my body back to Braj? It's not the moment now. In other words, we need this separation from Prema to increase to a certain point, to reach a certain purpose, and then that will happen. It will happen. There will be reunion. So Krishna implies this: when that Prem, upon reaching its desired level, and by exhibiting the mood of full separation, there are different levels of separation. When that ascends then to the stage of direct union, only then will I, who are dependent of that Prem, be obliged to bring my body to Braj, back to Braj. And that will happen, as we will see. So Krishna is just subservient to Prem. It's an important concept to understand over and over again. Even though Prem is a manifestation of Swarup Shakti, and Swarup Shakti exists in the service of Bhagavan. Interestingly, when that plays out in Lila, Krishna himself moves as subservient to Prem, to Swarup Shakti, even though still Swarup Shakti remains as a subordinate energy in the service of her master, if you will, or source. So by this, Krishna implies that their bodily separation will disappear in the future, basically. And as we mentioned, that will happen. So the external meaning of the second part of the verse then is as follows. Now, when he gives this comparison with the elements of nature present in each species, basically Krishna is saying, but I'm present in all beings since I'm the ingredient cause of creation. So within all moving, non-moving beings are the gross physical elements, air, water, fire, and so on. And I'm the supreme cause of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. I'm the shelter of everything, therefore. In other words, I'm present in each and everything, having entering into them. But again, for the gopis, this part of the verse means something else. For them is, Krishna says, I take shelter of the mind, life, air, intelligence, senses, and words of you, who are always meditating upon me in pure love. Taking shelter in each of these, I manifest myself, and thus I'm always present with you. So the gopis take a pretty much metaphysical and esoteric purport here. When Krishna is speaking about the elements of the material world, they hear Krishna implying, dedicating his own, praying to him, to them, and praising their love, and mentioning how he cannot but be there, taking shelter in each of these, in the gopis' minds, in the gopis' words, in the gopis' intelligence. We are fully surcharged, drenched in prem. So he cannot but be there. Srila Jiva Goswami says something similar also. For Srila Jiva Goswami, most of these verses, of this verse 9 verse of Krishna's message, contain 3 levels of meaning. Sometimes we may speak in terms of literal, interpretative, and esoteric, as my Guru Maharaj will like to present. The explicit meaning, obvious, the one that you can understand by certain connection with other ideas, and eventually the most invisible, deeper type of meaning. Or also, interestingly, Srila Jiva Goswami mentions that here Uddhav had to repeat Krishna's instructions 3 times till the gopis were able to draw the meaning that they felt, oh, here Krishna must be really saying this. And Uddhav came to realize and learn this thing from them. So that's another possibility. Uddhav repeated the verse once, and the gopis were not fully satisfied with the version of the verse, so they say, repeat the verse again, please. And they extracted a deeper meaning, and they say, one more time, please. And they finally extracted the deepest possible meaning of each one of these verses. And Uddhav himself, by doing that, by engaging in that exercise with the gopis, he himself started to realize the real meaning of these verses, which, as we mentioned, he was not having very clear in his own mind. So which are these 3 levels of meaning of the 3 levels of meaning of this verse according to Srila Jiva Goswami? The first meaning of this is as follows. Of course, it's the most explicit meaning, where he's saying, their gopis are, Krishna is saying to the gopis, you are never separated from me, because I'm the material cause and the Antaryami. So I'm in everything. I'm everything and I'm in everything. Sounds pretty monistic. Soham, something like this. So here in this, the gopis started to think, according to Sri Jiva, he's teaching us Brahma Gyan. And he's identifying everything with himself. We don't want to hear that. This is not pleasurable for us. This is not giving hope. So then they ask with indifference, what else is there? Like similar Mahaprabhu asking Ramananda Roy, go deeper. That's superficial. Say more. Augment those truths. So here again, Uddhav repeated what was written for a second time, following Krishna's instruction, in order that the gopis will quickly understand the desired deep meaning. So the second meaning, after the second repetition of the verses, there's no separation from me, Krishna is implying the verse. By making all efforts, sarvatmana, the word in the Sanskrit of this verse, there's no separation from me because my spurti always exists internally and externally. In other words, gopis are continuously having visions of Krishna, externally and in their inner self. And therefore, in this way, there's not possibly any type of separation because he's always appearing in their life, in their daily life, internally and externally. But as we will see, for the gopis, this is not enough to have visions of Krishna. They want him back in every single sense of the term. So in the third level of meaning, before reaching that, the gopis began to wonder in astonishment, like, again and again, he has written the same words because they are hearing the same verse over and over again. So they conclude there must be successively deeper meanings. So the third repetition Jiva Goswami mentioned, denies that he will appear as Spurti, and in the case, he will come directly. So the second level has to do more with the Spurti level. The first meaning has to do with the universal level. I'm everything and nature and all the elements. Second level is, okay, in my particular form, I manifest. You have visions of me. But the third meaning, as we'll see, has to do with, I will go there physically, if you will. So which is the third meaning, basically? I will go there physically, or we could say, I have never left there as well. Krishna eternally exists in Vrindavan. In other words, Krishna resides in these places eternally. He cannot but stay in Braj because of the force of the love there. So sometimes it is said that Krishna comes and goes from these places, Mathura, Dwarka, Vrindavan. But actually, as we know, we will continue sharing, Krishna is doing this through different forms. He's manifesting different forms. One stays, the one that never leaves Braj, stirs always there, and some other form lives. But he's a Chintya Shakti. He has that capacity of remaining in one place and going to another place in another form. So this is what is being illustrated with the example of the 5 elements. In the same way that the elements are present in the effects, in the results, like in a table or whatever, in aprakat form, in a manifest form, there is water, fire, air in a chair, but you cannot just like see the fire, see the water, but it's there. They are made of that. Everything is made of them. Similarly, Krishna implies, I'm present with you, gopis, in an aprakat form, unmanifest form, invisible form, which takes the form present in your minds and life airs. Shyam Sundar with the flute. That's a form that still in Braj, never leaves Braj, and appears in your mind and life airs continuously. So basically, Krishna implies with this separation from me that is experienced by you is not absolute. Again, meaning the idea is it does not occur with respect to all manifestations. Sarva Prakash. You are not separated from all of my forms. Rather, your separation is experienced only with regard to one single manifestation, to one single Prakash. Prakash means manifestation. Remember, Prakash are represented a dimension in which the Lila unfolds. I know this is difficult to understand with a limited head, but this is the notion in the realm of the Lila. There are different Prakashas. Prakashas means various dimensions in which the Lila unfolds simultaneously. And we are to enter there. So Krishna implies this idea here. Your separation is experienced only with a single window, a single portal, a single Prakash dimension, which is present within the visible Prakat Lila. But in relation to other Prakash, which are in the Aprakat Lila, in the unmanifest, there is indeed union, constant, permanent union. So this is the intended sense. Remember, Krishna has this capacity. He's omniscient. At the same time, he manifests different simultaneous forms in different dimensions without stopping existing in the other places. And so we can speak in terms of simultaneous coexistence of localization, basically. And when he appears at the same time in different places in his medium-sizedness, if you will, and at the same time retaining his omnipresence. That's the result of Swarup Shakti of Prem impacting Brahman, the Absolute. The Absolute, who is everywhere, becomes localized by the force of Prem, takes a shape, being carved by Prem, but still remains omnipresent, omniscient, omni. And each one of these forms, interestingly, is complete in itself. Srila Rupa Goswami describes all this very nicely in his Lagu Bhagavatamrita, all these differences, different prakashas and avatars and expansions and forms of Bhagavan. And not only the original is full, but every other form is full as well. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnanadaya Purnamiva Vasishyate, say the Upanishads. So let me close with some words shared by Srila Jiva Goswami in his Krishna Sandarbha. Some interesting point he makes. In this same connection, already we made the same point, the main point, in regarding the 3 levels of understanding of this verse. Basically, he says there, when he's analyzing Bhagavan's Krishna's, Bhagavan Sri Krishna's realm and associates and the nature of their exchange, that it is to be understood that because these prakashas, these dimensions are the existential ground for different acts, different leelas, Bhagavan virtually assumes out of his own will a different sense of self. That's what we call abhiman, and a state of mutual unawareness in regard to each other of the other forms, in respect to each of the various prakash, in order to nourish the aesthetic rapture appropriate to specific leelas. So only for the sake of lila, only for the sake of nourishing rasa in lila, it is that Bhagavan assumes out of his own volition and will different forms, and each one of those forms is unaware of the other form. Even though he has the potential of being aware, being omniscient, here we are speaking of Krishna and Braj, Nara Lila. The degree of the Swarup Shakti is such that he becomes covered by love, basically. So he assumes different abhimans, different independent expressions of will, of individuality in his different forms. It's not that there are many forms, but each one is doing the same thing, thinking the same thing, feeling the same thing simultaneously. It's not happening like that. Again, this is maybe difficult to understand, but we are speaking about God, and God in Braj. Braj means that place where everything is possible, especially for God. So, and this, the important point also that on top of this Srila Jiva Goswami makes is that this same state of affairs applicable to Bhagavan should be also understood to apply to his associates as well, because they are all his potencies. So Shaktiman is engaging in particular lila, but engaging in lila means engaging with Shakti. Lila means the interaction between Bhagavan and his associates. You take out the associate, there's no lila. You just leave Bhagavan alone. Which lila you have there? You need associate, you need potency, Shakti. So all these criteria applicable to Shaktiman is applicable to Shakti as well. So these associates have also, say, Jiva Goswami, different prakashas, dimensions, as we see, for example, in the case of Sri Devaki or other associates of Krishna, when Krishna is marrying 16,000 simultaneously princesses in Dwarka, simultaneously. And Narada is traveling around the different palaces, 16,000 palaces, where are 16,000 Krishnas marrying 16,000 wives, different Krishnas, if you will. And there are different Devakis and different associates participating in each one of the 16,000. So they are expanding according to Krishna's expansion for the purpose of Leela. Interestingly. This is happening in Dwarka. What to speak, how all the things express itself to the utmost degree in Braj. So in this way, it has been established that there are different prakashas, different dimensions of unfolding of the Leela, and different types of abhiman or self-identities and actions corresponding to Bhagavan and his associates in those prakashas. So such being the case, when Krishna, for example, went to Mathura, we are in that situation now, at that time the gopis, in their forms within the aprakat prakash, try to follow the Sanskrit terms, please. Aprakat prakash means the unmanifest dimension. They experienced union with the aprakat prakash of Krishna, which is situated in a specific manifestation in Vrindavan, beyond, again, external sight, but it's there. And the same gopis in the prakat prakash, in the manifest dimension, in those forms, and inside the prakat prakash of Vrindavan, they felt separation from Krishna in that particular dimension, while in other dimension they were meeting him constantly. So Krishna himself was in that prakat prakash before, but then left to Mathura in that particular dimension. And therefore it is said that that's why Krishna rightly said, your separation from me is never possible in an absolutistic sense. Again, it's only in relation to one particular prakash, and that separation with a particular purpose to nourish our eventual union, even in that prakash. And on the other side, again, this is state of permanent eternal union beyond the ordinary sight. We may call it the supreme secret. And that's why it has been spoken of in a highly concealed way or roundabout manner, because it's a pretty esoteric and confidential affair. So according to this understanding, just to conclude today, we could say it is certainly possible for Krishna to have both union with and separation from a particular associate simultaneously on different dimensions of being. He's united with one in one dimension, separated from that same but different person in another dimension. As the same, going back to the analogy of this verse, as the five elements, earth, water, fire, ether, and so on, are always one and different from creation. They are present in every created element, but they are separated as well, invisibly. So if the gopis had been separated, and this is also a common sense point to conclude, if the gopis had been actually separated from Krishna in an absolutistic sense, or in other words, if they have been separated from Krishna with regard to all prakashas, to all dimensions, they would not have been able to survive. I mean, they will not have been able to survive anymore that you can endure without air. Indeed, separation from Krishna on all dimensions of beings, on all prakashas, prakat, aprakat, absolutistic, is totally impossible for someone like the gopis. That's, and this is again further proof that they are still uniting with him in so many of these prakashas. And this very example is of the material elements, as you may recall, is also present in the third of the fourth Chaturshloki verse of the Bhagavatam, verse 34 of 9 chapters, second canto. So this indicates, if this is present there in the very seed of the Bhagavatam, indicates the essential message, the ultimate unfolding of these four seed verses of the Bhagavatam, and consequently of the whole book as well, which unfolds from these four verses, is to reveal the intrinsic nature of the gopis' love for Krishna, which is happening in this very precise moment here with this same example of the elements. So some words I want to share with you today in connection to this first verse with Krishna sending his message to the gopi through Uddhav. And in our next meeting, we will continue discussing the remaining 8 verses with their different levels of purport and interpretations by the Braja Gopikas. But today we'll finish here. And since today's meeting is not being streamed live, if you have any questions, please share them in the thread in our Tattva Vivek group, and I will try to reply them along the week. And hopefully see you next Monday. We will conclude offering our pranam to the Harikatha of Srimad-Bhagavatam and the Braja Gopikas and Sri Radha in particular, in the words of Uddhav himself, which had the potential of purifying the entire world, ourselves being a tiny speck of dust inside that. Bandinanda Brajastrinam Padarenum Abhishnusa Yasam Harikatod Gitam Punati Bhuvanatri. Srila Gurudev ki jai. Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Bhramara-gita ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Praman Haribo. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti vaishnava vrinda ki jai. Gaur Haribo.